Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hi, this is Tammy Patzer, and I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, Amy Oestreicher. Amy is a PTSD peer-to-peer specialist, artist, author, writer for the Huffington Post, speaker for TEDx and RAINN, health advocate, award-winning actress, and playwright. As a survivor and thriver of multiple traumas, Amy eagerly shares the gifts of life's beautiful detours. Her educational programming, writing, mixed media art, performance, and inspirational speaking amaze people from around the globe. Amy has headlined international conferences on leadership, entrepreneurship, women's rights, mental health, disability, creativity, and domestic violence prevention. She is a SheSource Expert and a regular lifestyle, wellness, and arts contributor to more than 70 notable online and print publications, and her story has appeared on NBC's Today, CBS, Cosmopolitan, 17 Magazine, The Washington Post, Good Housekeeping, MSNBC, and many others. Welcome, Amy.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you talk to us today because you have what I would call a story. And many of our listeners, they're always asking me, they're saying, Tammy, how do I tell my story and how do I choose the right story to tell so that it's powerful and impactful and it makes a difference? So that's what I want to focus on today, Amy, because we could talk about many things. But today I'd really like to focus on the power of words. So tell me more about you, your story, and the power of words.
All right. Well, I don't want to spend most of the time talking about my story because that would definitely take the whole time. But my story in a really brief nutshell is, well, you know what, actually, to frame this right, I'm going to tell my story, and any listeners out there, I would love for you to kind of put yourself in my shoes and ask, what would you do in my position? Well, I had my life pretty much all figured out, as we all think we do when we're teenagers. And I was, sexually assaulted by my voice teacher, which I did not expect when I was 17. And I completely, froze and left my body and don't remember anything. And then just, a terrible sequence of events that I had a really bad stomach ache the April of my senior year. And very long story short, the pain was just getting worse. And I developed a blood clot. And, my stomach literally exploded. It hit the ceiling of the operating room. And I was in a coma for months. And I woke up months later, and doctors said I couldn't eat or drink anything, and they didn't know if I'd ever be able to again. I didn't have a stomach anymore. So it was, a very new reality. I felt like I kind of woke up in the twilight zone. I was not given a deadline or, roadmap. It was just, leave the hospital eventually after months. But we were still waiting for answers. How would I ever be surgically reconnected again? Would I ever eat or drink again? And so I think because I'd always loved creating and performing and always had a passion for life, I didn't want to just give that up. I didn't really know how to be a patient in this position. I certainly wasn't patient. So I think how I coped was I just knew I could only take it one day at a time, and I just kept creating and doing and getting myself out there, because I felt like if I'm not doing something, then, am I even here? I think I just felt such a passionate drive to just still exist. And so I ended up writing a musical about my life. I did art. I started a chocolate business because I was so hungry that I just wanted to play with food. I kind of just improvised. And it ended up being 6 years unable to eat or drink, which I never would have expected, and 27 surgeries until they finally were able to reconstruct me. And now, medically things aren't perfect, but I'm eating and drinking, and I've actually turned my show into a mental health and sexual assault prevention program that I take across the country to not only theaters but schools and organizations, and it's been so rewarding to help others create. And you mentioned the power of words. That's actually a name of one of my workshops that I lead, where I show people exactly the healing powers that putting my story had for me. It was if I was capable of it, then really anyone is, but it takes a long time for those words to come, and that's okay. For a while I was so numb and in shock that I didn't know what I was feeling. I didn't know how to express my story. And what I learned, especially as later on I started studying psychology and the aftermath of trauma, is we can only heal when we find the words, and that's kind of the journey. Because, staying numb was probably the easiest way to cope with my situation. I tried to stay numb for a really long time, where I didn't have to feel the hurt, the betrayal, the frustration I felt. And the hardest part was finding a way to be with my feelings without them kind of running my life. And I remember I called one therapist and I said, I feel like I'm going crazy. Like, I don't know how to cope with this anymore. This is so hard. And all she said was, you have to say what happened to you. And I remember I hung up on her. I'm like, she is oversimplifying things. What is she talking about? I just have to say it. And then I tried to say, out loud, what had happened to me. And I found that, I couldn't. Emotionally, I just couldn't. It was difficult. And then I realized that she was right. Until I could actually put into words what happened to me, I couldn't really heal because I wasn't facing it myself. So the idea of sharing your story, it's a really long process. And I feel like you find the answers to your story in the process of learning how to tell your story. In expressive writing, it's called reframing your narrative. A big example is a huge deal was in 2012 when I premiered the one-woman musical about my life, Gutless and Grateful. I had never talked about what had happened to me before. And so I think because everything was so secretive or just, in my own world, I felt like an outcast, like no one would understand me. And, those feelings just feed on themselves. But putting together a musical about my life, I never saw my life as a neat little cohesive story arc. I saw surgery this, and would I ever get my life together that, and but actually trying to put the events in my life into a narrative, it didn't come like that. I had to arrange it. I had to create, okay, I want to do a 70-minute musical. What is the theme? I had to approach my life like a novel. And it's interesting. I wrote an article for Huffington Post called "How to Turn Your Life into the Best Story You Ever Read." And, our lives don't come prepackaged as a story, but it's in figuring out how we're going to tell that story where we find the meaning in it. So that was why when I finally premiered my musical for total strangers, when I hadn't even talked about my story, it was such an amazing experience because, I had found meaning in my life for the first time. And now sharing it, other people could relate to my story for the first time because, although they didn't relate to, their stomach exploding and all that, they could relate to the themes I shared in my story, the anger, the uncertainty, the frustration, triumphing, and determination. So that was really the first time I saw that, wow, anyone can put their life into a story. And once you do, people don't think about like the specific, exactly what happened to you. They feel, the arc of what you've been through because there are certain kind of arcs that we all experience in life. So that was really the first time I was able to figure out my story for myself. Sorry if that was a long-winded answer to your question.
I was listening because I was actually doing the math, and it was like, you said 6 years, and it's like 2,100 and some day, 2,190 days. And
it's
then
funny. I have an old I have an old blog. Yeah, I have an old blog which is kind of torture to read because I start counting the days, and that this was when also I was so obsessed with food that I started cooking for my family, which is kind of insane. But on the blog, I label the days day 92, 93, and it's I'm looking at I don't even know how I could stand myself.
Well, it's just, that is a long time. Do you ever find that some people, when they hear your story, they're saying, oh my goodness, my story isn't as dramatic?
Oh my God. That's I just made a frequently answered questions page on my site, and that's the first one. I mean, it comes from a good place, but it's my least favorite question. But I understand it. But the one thing I don't want is I don't want people to hear my story and be in shock that, oh my God, that's fine that you were so resilient, but I could never do something like that. The whole point, and if you watch my TEDx talk, you'll hear my story in more detail, but you'll also hear my idea about detours. The whole idea of my story is, yes, what happened to me is extreme, but I was able to heal when I was able to just see it as a detour like any other detour people would have, because that made me feel relatable. And the truth is, I was just a teenager who was stubborn and creative, and just wanted to get to the next day. I mean, how many teenagers do we know like that? So, and I didn't know that I had these resources within me until I was tested. And that's why, in a way, I call this my beautiful detour, because I don't know if I weren't tested, if I would be really forced to know I had that strength that I still carry with me. So, and, in my presentations, I talk about my, what I learned as I went, my 4, hardcore resilience skills, which are simple. They're hope, creativity, gratitude, and sharing our story. And I do tons of presentations on that for all kinds of trauma and all kinds of little things and big things, because it's true. It doesn't matter what we've been through. It's the idea that there are things in life that we don't expect, and whatever they are, we can all kind of find resilience in very similar ways.
Well, I think you're right, because I've been in many situations where people carry shame, and sometimes it's not even their shame that they're carrying. It might be a family shame or something a member of their family did, or of course it could be something related to them. but I know that when people actually
Yeah.
do verbalize it or write it, it seems to open up a door. So when you're teaching people with your workshops about creating this personal story, how do you start? If you were to give someone maybe a few tips on like, well, how do you start to really find out what your story is?
Yeah, I don't get right into telling your story because I remember how hard it was for me. So, if you told that to me, when I was, first trying to heal, like I would have been so overwhelmed, my mind would have frozen up. I didn't have the words, and if I could sense like the words, I ran away from them because it scared me. Because telling your story to others also means that you have to confront it yourself, and sometimes that's not so easy. Even though you may think it should be easy, you'll come across kind of roadblocks like, oh, I guess I repressed that emotion, So for me, that's why creativity was a good midway point. Before I could even use my voice, like I remember feeling just this coldness in my throat, like just saying, a sentence about what happened was just too much. And so really, honestly, it started with just doodling, and, how I got into art and just visually, with no words, but it was a safe way that I could start feeling again and getting those emotions out there in a way where I was expressing them and facing them, but they weren't like scary, and like larger than myself. Through creativity, I found a sense of control over my story, and I could actually see what I was feeling on the paper. And I did art for a really long time. It became a huge passion because I realized that, wow, like I'm actually feeling this way. And then, years later, I was able to share that art and see how it affected others. And that really gave me the strength to start putting things into words. And, that started by like writing songs and poems, which were still like a little removed from literally talking about what I had been through because I needed that. But, I call it like kind of dipping your toes in your story. You can't push it. In a way, like I'm definitely very thankful that I lived in a bubble, like coming out of the hospital, and I had like no internet and no social media, because like I wonder, like, I needed that time, to just write and create before I was ready to share it. And even though like I'm sharing my story all over the place now, I always try to remind people that for 10 years, I was just doing this stuff on my own, and I needed that. So sometimes you need a while to process it, and that's okay.
Yeah, 10 years, if you look at that in the terms of how your life, and you're still fairly young too, you were a teenager,
Yep.
So by the time you went from your teen years, 10 years would put you into almost into your 30s, which of course that's your big growth and change is happening. So art, you did a musical, and then the detours. You actually travel to different colleges, and you call it the people a detourist, or you a detourist.
I do, yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and again, all that I talk a lot about in my TED Talk. A detour is, we all have detours in life, and they're little and they're big. An example of that actually is, I started once a week, and anyone can write in. I have a feature on my site where, someone writes about any kind of detour in their life, whether it's like they lost a job, or if it's a chronic illness, or all kinds of detours. Or it could be a detour that's not so serious, like I decided to join a new gym and I never would have met, my husband. And what I love about this feature I started is you really see that detours come in all shapes and sizes, illness, divorce, jobs, surprises, good, bad. But there's one common thread that, that detour we didn't expect, but following it, eventually, if we show up and are willing to just take it one day at a time, it will lead to something, and then we can make our own meaning from it. So that's what a detourist is. Something happens that they don't expect, and they all you have to do is show up and just be open and curious. I love the idea of just intentionally curious. You see this path, it's in a different direction, I wonder where that may go, and that's just enough curiosity to get you to the next day and the next day, even if it's hard, even if it's raining. but eventually, you'll find, something from it. And, that's an ongoing process, because we'll have one detour and then another one comes the next week. If you watch my TED Talk, the big flower in my detour was getting married. Well, the next month I got divorced.
Oh, my goodness.
And at first I was like, this is not fitting into my detour. But, and that's natural, of course. Even when you've been hit with every kind of unexpected thing, it's human nature to want to feel settled in, and knowing where their path goes. But I really was forced to, take my own medicine again and be like, okay, I know in 5 years or whatever, I'm going to understand, why this led me, this and that way, because I'll have traveled it. The meaning doesn't just fall from the sky, but it will come if you just keep going forward, because that's the only thing you can do. And then you'll have a new story.
So tell me a little bit more about some of the events and things that you're doing here coming up in 2017.
Oh, it's going to be a crazy 2017. Lots of detours. I'm really excited. I'm really excited, actually. I'm actually giving a presentation on detours and actually feminism, sexual assault, and Judaism in New York next month, and then I'll go right to a sexual assault prevention conference where I'll be talking about empathy through telling your story. And then I'm actually going to Minnesota, which is super exciting because, I've been touring my musical Gutless and Grateful for a few years, but actually a college senior had seen my videos online and she asked to perform it. So I thought, it's a huge honor. And since then, a few people have licensed the show from me. And so I'll be watching her sing and dance as me, which I'm a little nervous for, but very excited. And then, I'll be taking it to Florida, Arizona, Orlando, a bunch of different places. And I'm still booking, so you can always send me a note. But, I do the full show. Sometimes I just do excerpts and talk about new resilience. Sometimes I just lead workshops. So, and again, this is all from a detour. This all really started because I thought, you know what, I want to put some music and dialogue together and just put something together about my life. I never would have expected it to transform into all these things. But, and that's business advice too. You don't have to think about the big picture all at once because Lord knows I didn't. Business is a detour too, and you got to be open to the opportunities that come. I never, had expectations like this. So I try to stay open to everything.
Wow. You have the Gutless and Grateful events, and actually I live in Florida, and I saw you were actually coming to Sarasota, Florida, which is near me at the end of January.
Awesome. Yes.
So I was like,
Sarasota,
goody.
Florida. Oh, you'll have to come, yeah.
I can check that out.
Yeah, 2 exciting Florida things because I'm doing that on January 28th, and then I'm coming to Orlando at the end of April, and this is really exciting for me personally because it's for the Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor. So basically, it's a conference for when I was in the ICU for months, all those clowns and mimes with like ukuleles that like came to cheer like the kids up. Like I didn't realize those are certified like therapeutic humor professionals. So like I saw this conference and I'm like, I have to apply. So I'm saying, this is for me, it's like the ultimate kind of full circle giving back thing that I'm giving like a presentation on the healing effects of humor, because my show is a comedy. And I'm bringing my parents with me, and, I'm really excited. And it's in Disney World, so I'm really excited for that. Anyone in Disney World at the end of April.
Wow. Well, one of the things about you is you are an example of a true entrepreneur, too, because you now on a speaking tour around the country, and many people I know, their big dream is they want to speak. And so I'm looking at your website, and it's Amy, AMYOES.com. And you have, everyone, you have to go look at her website, because if you
thank you.
You've got the detours, you have writing, you have the blog, art, the speaking, the different.
I know there's a ton of content, so it's actually going through a major redesign. I just got the layout for my new homepage, and I'm super excited. So I'll be looking for feedback from anyone, but I think it's going to be great. Yeah, because the problem is when you do a lot, how do you focus it?
Yes, believe me, I know that problem.
Yeah, it's what happens with us creative types where we want to do everything.
So is there anything, like I said, we could just talk and talk and talk all day long.
Yeah.
Is there anything related to the power of words in storytelling that you want to leave the audience with?
Yes, I'm begging you, don't rush your story, in terms of sharing it or trying to make it into a story. And don't force the words. Really, I encourage everyone to just, pick up a crayon. I love crayons. And just, put on some music that you're really passionate about, and don't expect anything, but let your mind kind of wander and see where it takes you. And you know what, if that inspires you to say, I want to journal a little bit about this, if that, swirl you're making reminds you of something, then go with that. But that's all you should expect, and then you can expect everything. It's true.
Wow. So incorporate music, art, let your mind wander, and you'd be surprised at what comes out. But I really do understand what you're saying. Sometimes the words, often we know that journaling is useful in art, but sometimes we don't do it because we are afraid of what we might find out that's out there. So it takes a little bit of time, and I think you're a really good example.
The truth is, it can be really scary to feel. You did not want to see me when I was in emotional shambles from my divorce. It's scary, but it's stuff we have to go through eventually, to get to the other side.
Yes. Well, so go ahead and tell us again where we can find out more about you and what you're doing and your services.
Yes. My website is the best, amyoes.com. That's also my Twitter handle at amyoes, and I'm on Facebook. But definitely, I love hearing from people. Like I said, you can also share your story on my website. Any detour qualifies, really. And please, send me a note. I would love to hear from you. I'm booking my show. I do coaching, and I have a book coming out at the end of next year, which will be available for pre-order soon. But yes, I love hearing from people.
So what's the title of your book, tentatively?
It's going to have something to do with my beautiful detours, but I'm trying to keep the details kind of under wraps.
Oh, okay. Okay, perfect. So new book coming out, speaking tours. You just got the invitation directly from Amy herself. Go to amyoes.com and share your detour with her and find out everything else. Like, believe me, she's been on TED Talks. She's done a lot of different things around the country with different groups. So check Amy Oestreicher out. And again, Amy, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
You're so sweet. Thank you. This was wonderful.
This is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.